Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for CoraMay's oral presentation. I've had the honor of having her in our Algebra 2 this year as my senior assistant. Thank you all for coming. Y'all can be seated. I'm going to pray for her and then hand it over to her. Oh, also on the panel, we have joining me is JT Goodart and Ron Miller, and I am Jana Gomez. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for the time you've given me with CoraMay over the year. Thank you for all of these people who have come out to listen to what she has to say. I ask that you would give her wisdom and discernment as she shares what you've placed on her heart as she's on the panel answering questions, and that you would give her peace. And during sharing all the convictions that you've placed on her, I ask that you would open all of our hearts, minds, and ears as we listen to what she has to share, and that we would also gain our own convictions from what she has to share with us, and that they would all be rooted in your truth. And I ask all of this in your holy, precious name. Amen.
Did you know that 1.6 million children are frozen at negative 196 degrees? Did you know that there's an abortion conducted every 28 seconds? Did you know that 60% of all children born through surrogacy are for same-sex couples? Life begins at conception, when a cell has a unique DNA compound with the potential to become a fully developed human being. Life is a gift from the Lord. He has blessed us with the ability to bring life into this world through the biological mandate to be fruitful and multiply. Yet we are led to believe that life is insignificant and worthless because it can now be manufactured in a lab and destroyed by a simple pill. The Lord has called us to more. We have a responsibility to protect children, conception through adulthood, by bringing them into the world as God designed, raising them in a household where there's one biological male parent and one biological female parent. In doing so, we are rooting adults in the gospel who are equipped to know God and further his kingdom. In the fertility technology world, people define life and give it value based on their current circumstances and the outcome they desired. But we do not have this authority. God has deemed children a blessing. They are an unalloyed good in any capacity they are conceived and circumstance they are brought into. God's optimal design for children is birth through one biological man and one biological woman. As a society, we are getting further from God's design through surrogacy and in vitro fertilization. We have justified abortion, which is the act of destroying God's image in the form of an unborn baby. Even though science has opened pathways for children to be born outside the biological mandate, this does not mean that these children are less human. Children born through any means are made in the image of God, and their life is valuable. Human life is worth our time and attention because, as taught here in Rhetoric 1, people are made in the imago Dei, translated in the image of God. This means we are humans with eternal souls, forever tethered to our Maker, something to be honored and appreciated with the deepest sincerity. The further our culture leans towards manufacturing life through science, the less sacred it becomes to our society. Children brought into this world should be celebrated because every new life is a miracle, an outpouring of God's love to bless us with another unique individual. Today, we are living in an age of radical childlessness. Children are not to be celebrated, but rather to be avoided. They are seen as a burden that will take away from our individual autonomies and careers. 54.3% of women in the U.S. ages 15 to 49 are using some form of contraceptive to sidestep the biological mandate. Christian women are not excused from these statistics. 99% have or will. These women claim to rest in the Lord's sovereign plan until it comes to having a child. Surely the Lord does not know my career goals. His timing is perfect in everything else, except when it comes to having a child. So I will control my body how I please. All of this points to a deep heart condition of selfishness. It is all about me. In America alone, an average of 1 million abortions are conducted each year. Children are seen as an inconvenience of the sex pleasure and something that can be prevented through abortion. But abortion is the act of murder. You are taking the life of another person. At conception, a child has a completely unique DNA from its parents. This constitutes this child as a human with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what about women on the other side? Women who are unable to have children because of infertility issues or because of their life choices to be in a same-sex relationship or to remain unmarried. Many of these women have a natural desire for a child that cannot be fulfilled with anything else. And instead of looking at the 3 million children in the U.S. who are considered orphans due to the loss of one or both parent, they go through the process of surrogacy or IVF. In vitro fertilization is the procedure of fertilizing eggs outside of the womb and then implanting them for a better chance of live birth. An average of 10 to 15 eggs are harvested when a woman undergoes the process of IVF. Before implantation, the embryos undergo a screening process, where they are graded based on cell health, division, and gender. The parents then pick 1 to 4 embryos they desire to be implanted based on gender preferences. This is known as family completion through sex selection. The other embryos are then killed, frozen, or donated for research. The scariest part of all of this is that only 7% of all clinically created babies are born alive. 93% are killed in the process or disregarded due to sex selection or grade failure. Lila Rose, founder of Live Action, a national human rights organization, says that we are not entitled to children. They are gifts and blessings. IVF allows parents to take authority of their infertility with the hope of bringing a child into the world, but it overrides God's design in favor of giving the parents what they want. Surrogacy, which was once the selfless act of carrying a child for a family member or a close friend, has now become a $14 billion industry that can be boiled down to human trafficking and the exploitation of surrogates and children. Surrogacy is a contract of using another woman's body to carry the child you cannot. It divides a woman's body into parts to be purchased for the purpose of piecing together God's creation. It severs the biological relationship to satisfy the desire of the commissioning parents. It inflicts a biological trauma that these children are affected by for the rest of their life. The process of surrogacy presupposes that the commissioning parents have the right to a child through any means and cost, to the detriment of the child's rights. When the Lord is not giving a child in accordance with his design, he's giving us the painful answer no, or not right now. It has never been easier for us to solve the problem of infertility through science, but we need to make sure we are aligned with God's timing and design. I had the pleasure to interview Miss Rosie Boom, a New Zealand author and mother of 6. She grew up on the mission field in Papua New Guinea with her family and always desired to be married and have a family of her own. But with no hopes of that happening, she set off to be a nurse on the mission field. 3 years into serving, she was kicked out of the country by the Muslim government there. When she was forced to return home, she reunited with an old friend who proposed within the year. Miss Rosie explained to me how her relationship with the Lord was strengthened in trusting his perfect timing when her dreams of a family seemed so far-fetched. She said it was all the more sweeter to get married and raise a family in God's timing rather than forging her own path. For parents that are unable to have children because of infertility issues, the greatest option aligned with God's design is adoption. Adoption is one of the most beautiful things in this broken world. It takes a fractured situation corrupted by sin and brings restoration by placing the child into the care of loving parents. As believers, we should be very familiar with the language of adoption, because that is how the Lord has grafted us into his heavenly kingdom. Ephesians 1:5-6 says, "In love he predestined us for adoption to himself, as sons through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of his will, to the praise of his glorious grace, with which he has blessed us in the beloved." Adoption is one of the greatest ways to celebrate the existence of children. It places their needs above our own and gives them a place to be loved. When children have been welcomed into the world, they deserve to be raised by a mother and a father in a God-centered home. The biblical context of child rearing begins in marriage. God designed children to need both a mother and a mother to nurture and a father to bring security. My Aunt Taylor is a loving mother of 5 who so well described the role of a family in a child's life when she said, "No matter our vocation, God has made us social beings, and the world is full of people. People who need love, structure, order, consistency, stability, parents in a stable marriage, someone to safeguard the home, the culture of the home, and the beauty cultivated there." Parents committed to one another in marriage actively live out the gospel on display for their children. When children are raised by married parents, their home environment is stable, and it allows childhood to be everything God intended it to be. Children's purpose is to grow into adults who contribute to the world, and they can do that to the fullest potential when they've been molded in a home where morals and culture are taught in alignment with God's word. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Children are equipped in the home to be well-rounded adults who can confidently enter the world and continue God's design for life. God's design for childhood is set up so that they receive everything they need, but our current reality of family is distorted in so many ways. Divorce, same-sex marriage, and partnership over marriage are pledging our culture. Divorce restructures God's intended design for the family. It leaves the child with the questions of who they belong to, who ultimately has authority in their life, and pressures them to compete for attention. Couples living in partnerships over marriage are creating an unstable environment for the child. Children who are raised by their parents' partners are 40% more likely to be abused by the partner that is not their biological parent. Children who are being raised by single-parent households are suffering under our radars. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 85% of all youth in prison today are from fatherless homes, and 1 in 4 children in the U.S. live without any father figure at all. When children are raised in a household where In a household where same-sex marriage is normal, the child will have a skewed view of reality and a misunderstanding of what marriage should look like. These children are reported to suffer from depression and thoughts of suicide way above average, leading them to be twice as likely to need mental health counseling. None of this should surprise us. As a society, we have ordained ourselves with the authority to manipulate and destroy life according to our desires. The responsibility and consequences reside on our shoulders. In the US, we have a birth rate that is below 2%, not even high enough to replenish the population. We are teaching women to be at war with their motherhood from a very young age, and we are allowing innocent children to be raised by same-sex couples who can't even give a definition for what a man or a woman is. In Human Society and Literature, a senior elective I took this past fall semester, we were able to see this idea of the family unit dissolved to assembly lines and test tubes in Huxley's Brave New World. Huxley depicts a future in which humans are only valued for what they can produce and consume. Children are created and genes are manipulated by chemical injections based on what caste they will belong to. This is not life born out of love or celebration of who they are as a person, uniquely created in the image of God. This is manufacturing life with the agenda of consumption. This devastating reality of Huxley's Brave New World is not all that far from the current reality our children are growing up in. In vitro fertilization, surrogacy, and abortion are mutation of God's design for life through science that our culture has come to use as a way to satisfy our desires. The end goal of God's perfect design is relationship. The biological mandate allows us to generate life, expand families, and develop community. When we celebrate, raise, and send children out in the fear and admiration of the Lord, then his kingdom is perpetuated through people, and people are what God is all about. People are God's currency. This is God's perfect design for children and in turn for all people. Vice President J.D. Vance, in his March for Life speech this year, clearly put this idea front and center when he said, "We know that family is not just a source of great joy, but that it is a part of God's design for men and women, a design that extends outwards from our family to our neighborhoods, to our communities, and to the United States of America. Family is God's intended design for children to be conceived, raised, and equipped, to know him and enter the world prepared to make him known. It is our purpose and joy to protect children everywhere, conception through adulthood, by celebrating their entrance into the world, raising them as God designed in a household where there is one biological male parent and one biological female parent. And in doing so, we are rooting adults in the gospel, equipped to know God and further his kingdom. May we realize that the battle for life in the form of an unborn baby is something the devil delights in, and we should not give way to. We have been given a clear command to go forth and multiply, so let us not falter from the task. May we open the door for more life to be created and celebrate the life in our midst faithfully. Let's put the fun back in fecundity. Thank you.
Way to go. You did great. Awesome job. All right. So what do you hope people take away from your speech and panel?
I hope that people can realize that we have mutated God's original and perfect design for life, and in doing so, the children are the victims in all of those mutations, whatever that may be.
What made you choose this thesis topic and why is it relevant for today?
I chose this thesis topic because I wanted to do something that meant a lot to me. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I was like, what do I love most? I was like, my family. I was like, this makes sense. And I think that surrogacy and IVF and abortion are very relevant topics. And I think because of the way that our world is going and all of the health issues that we now have, it's becoming more of a relevant issue because less women are able to have children naturally, and so IVF and surrogacy are more options that are on the table for more women.
I do want to commend you for taking on a heavy topic that you chose. A lot of the topics you highlight in your speech can be seen as being controversial or polarizing. So how do you defend your position while still showing Christ-like love toward people whose lives contradict your thesis?
I think it needs to be a conversation. I don't think it needs to be an argument. I think that when people are looking at using IVF or surrogacy or even contemplating abortion, I think if they came to me, I would want to wrap them in my arms and give them a hug and meet them where they're at with compassion. And then I think a lot of people are very unfamiliar with the processes of these fertility technologies, and so I think that if I was able to show them the processes and educate them on what was actually happening and show them what could happen, then I think that we could have a conversation rather than being straight, you're wrong. I think that's where that would not be fun.
That's good. Okay. You say that we have the responsibility to bring children into this world as God has designed. What is this design and how do we carry this out?
I think God's design is very clearly that children should be conceived, first of all, in marriage through one biological man and one biological woman. And I think we have a responsibility because He's given us that ability. And so if we're taking that and mutating that, then I think that that's where we're going wrong. But I think just the biological mandate speaks for itself, and that we're able to bring children into the world as God designed, which is amazing.
Okay. Um, at somewhere towards the end, you talk about we have failed to make sacrifices that have allowed the world to get to this point. So, what are those sacrifices that we should be making, and what does that look like for us?
I think one of the main sacrifices is that parents are saying, hey, I want this child, so I'm going to go through any of these means to get that child, to the detriment of the child's rights and the biological relationships that they're severing. And I think that is a sacrifice that the children are making, whether they realize it or not. The children are being victimized in that situation. And so, if you, as the parent, if you, as the person that's saying, I want this biological child or I want this child, and the Lord isn't allowing that to happen, then I think that that's where you need to say, okay, I'm going to give this to the Lord. Whether that's saying, hey, I'm never going to have a child, and that's okay. Or if that's saying, hey, I'm going to wait and I'm going to allow the Lord to mend my heart. And then I'm going to say, is adoption the right thing for me? And is the Lord, I think that's when I would say, hey, Lord, is this something that you want me to do? Would this be something that you're leading me to do, or is that just being making it all about me? I think when it's all about you and it's all about what you want, then we're allowing the weaker people, the children in that instance, to sacrifice for us.
And how can we, like, what are practical ways that we ensure that we are living out this ideal and as God intended, as God's design um, that you kind of talk about?
I think practical things that we have allowed ourselves to become normal to, and I think that one of the main areas is sex outside of marriage, and I think that that is a very black and white thing that you as a person should say no to, right? Like, I'm not going to do that. That's not a part of God's design. Um, so I would say that is a very big main one. And then I think practically, I think parents are seen like, I think children are seen as like they take so much time, there's so much work. And I think that that's a very misconception because I think when you're not enjoying your children and you're not enjoying this life, right, that God has allowed you to bring into the world, then you're going wrong. And so I think when you're saying, how can I think a lot of people get mixed up in all the things that they're like, oh, we need to be doing this, we need to be doing this, we need to be doing this. But when you're just saying, hey, this is the child that God's allowed me to have. How can I love you? How can I parent you well? Not falling to the cultural norms of saying, oh my gosh, we need to go to 3 different soccer practices. We need to do all this stuff rather than just saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what the Lord has allowed us to do. And I'm your parent and I love you and just want to have a relationship. I think when it's less about relationship and more about the outcomes that we're producing, then we've lost the plot.
Okay. Um, Technology is always advancing and in many cases making our lives easier. Medical advancements help people in many different ways. They help save lives, find cures or remedies. When do we know whether or not these technological advancements are contradictory to God's design, or if it's just classified as medical help or manufacturing life? Where do we draw this line and how do we combat this as Christians?
I think that abortion is a very black and white issue of where technology has gone wrong. If you are destroying life for any purpose, and I think this is even where euthanasia, is also in that category. But I think abortion is a very black and white issue in saying that that is clearly wrong. Like, that is technology used in the worst possible way. And I also think, I think IVF is a very great issue, but I think the main problem with IVF is the freezing of these children. There's 1.6 million children frozen, and I think when we have the technology to do that, and we're actually utilizing that to just put these children away, because they're unwanted at this time, or parents are like, oh, maybe I'll come back to them, or whatever. I think that that is clearly, we have overstepped, and that's not right. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Um, let's see. you kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want to get a little bit more into it. Um, you bring out or bring up people waiting for God's time and being willing to accept his no when it comes to having kids or just, being willing to wait. How do I know adoption is my path and not just me trying to forge my own path? Is it out of selfish desires or is it my calling?
I think that there's a lot of natural timelines put in place through the foster care system, and even if you're just going straight around and adopting a child, that create a lot of timing and waiting, and can be like, hey, do we really actually want to go through this? And I think so. I think there's a lot of natural systems set in place that do that, but I also think, if you're a couple that has had really big problems with infertility, and you're like, man, okay, I think we should look at adoption. I think taking that and saying, okay, Lord, I don't want to do this for me. I don't want to do this because we've lost a baby, or I don't want to do this to replace that child. I think just waiting for the Lord, and just when you have peace of knowing, I want to do this, I want to bring a child into my home, whatever that may look like, because adoption and foster care are not perfect systems. I mean, they are man created and they are really messy, and it takes a lot of time. And so I think that naturally those systems are set in place, but also going before the Lord and saying, Lord, is this something that you've put on my heart? Lord, and if it is, let me have complete peace. Give me wisdom and let me be open to anything that may come my way. Because adoption, you're not like hand picking a child, right? And so you don't know the situations that are going to come your way. Or even if you do already have children and you're opening your home for adoption and foster care, like saying, Lord, how is this going to affect my other children as well? Lord, is this something that my family is prepared to do? And then do we have the bandwidth to do that?
As all things in this world, they have become fallen and don't always go as God intended. Can God redeem family structures that do not fit this design? And what does that look like?
I think that adoption is that redemption. I think when the family structure is broken for whatever reason, whether that's a death or there's a single parent, so whether that's remarriage, because I do think there are beautiful situations where a spouse has died and the couple, um, I think when the person gets remarried, and that can create a very stable environment for the child, and I think that's what those children need. But I think adoption too, you're bringing that child in, you're rescuing that child from just all of these things that he's left with, and all of these traumas of saying, I've literally been ripped away from what I'm supposed to know. Like, family should be one of the most stable things in a child's life. That's where they're getting all of their relationship from. Like, that's what they're going to go meet the world with. And so if you can redeem that through adoption, through foster care, then I think that those are those areas.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mr. Art.
All right. First, want to say good job. Um, so we're we're gonna talk some theology for a few minutes. Um, so you brought up the Imago Dei, the fact that we are made in the image of God. So the first question with that I want to ask is, do you think society has stopped viewing people as being made in God's image?
I think absolutely. I think in any capacity, like if you're even just like how people are treated in the day to day, I think people are not viewing them. I don't think that's front and center when in our mind when we meet people every day. I think even like the other day I was staying in Target and somebody cut me off in line, and I was like, wow, like that's so rude. And I was like, but that person's made in the image of God. Like, I should pray for this person, like it's okay. So I think the world would be a very different place if we had that in our mind every day. And I think C.S. Lewis has great writings about that, of how every interaction you have with a person, you are either leading them to heaven or away from heaven. And so how is every action, how's every conversation either pointing them to or away from that? And I think the first way you can do that is saying, this person is made in the image of God. However they've treated me, however they look, whatever our differences is, this person is made in the image of God and they have an eternal soul, and I'm affecting them. So I think that.
Amen. Um, so now can you flesh out a little bit more for me how that lack of viewing people as being made in God's image leads to the issues that you've brought up in your thesis?
Yeah, I think you're just commercializing people, and I think that that's so wrong. because it's not saying, hey, this person is a person, this person has a completely unique DNA, which I think that's the scientific way of saying that this person is a unique person. But I think when obviously abortion, like you're destroying that person, like that's awful. Like that is the destruction of God's image. And then I think IVF, when you're saying, oh, we're going to make this many and then we're only going to use this one and we're going to handpick that. And then you're saying, oh, those other ones, I'm not sure what I want to do with them yet or if we'll ever come back to them. So let's just set them aside. That's not how we should treat people. Like you can't just set aside a person and say, hey, we're going to leave you in a freezer for however long. And if we want to come back to you, we'll come back to you. You don't have like that is so wrong on every level. Like that is a person and you can't just do that to them. And so I think there, and then surrogacy, I think is a very touchy topic because you're saying, hey, I want this child, so I'm going to use you, a woman, right? I'm going to use this woman to get the child that I want, and then I'm going to take that child from the only relationship they've ever known in this world for 9 months, and I'm going to say, hey, you're mine, and then I'm going to raise you as mine. And whether or not you know, however you were brought into the world, that's the parent's choice, right? Like the parents get to decide how they raise that child and how they're going to tell them about how the way that they were conceived and brought into this world. And so the children are like just left. And I think when you're commercializing people, I mean, that is like next level evil in my mind.
Agreed. Great answer. Um, so to kind of piggyback off of one of Miss Gomez's questions, um, it I think as Christians, there's a lot of topics, not even just the ones that you bring up in your paper, but there's a lot of topics where we kind of have to wrestle through, okay, what is like a good scientific advancement that is, kind of the Lord's common grace to humanity versus what is something that's stepping over the bounds. And you talked about in answering her question how there's very clear lines of like, abortion is murder or, different things like that. But just zoom out for me a bit and walk me through how you determine those things. Like, what is the process that we should go through as Christians when evaluating medical or scientific things of how to determine, yes, this is in line with or permissible by God's word, or no, it's not?
I think that human life should be our like golden standard. And so I think you can have this. I think people need a definition of life, and they need to know when it begins to have this conversation. And so in my paper, I define life that life begins its conception when a cell has a unique DNA compound to become the fully human being. And so I think if people are disagreed on when life begins, you're going to have lots of issues. So I think if we're starting from that standpoint of saying life begins at conception, then I think that automatically takes out IVF, because IVF in the sense that you're going to produce more children than you're using, right? So if you're saying, hey, I'm only going to actually harvest one egg, fertilize one egg, I'm only going to try for one child, then I think that that is less wrong. But I think when you're saying, no, we're gonna do this we're gonna do it at once, and who knows, if it doesn't work, we'll come back. There's always another one. I think that that is definitely wrong, and just like a misuse of science, and that's not. I think the medicine world should be to cultivate life and flourish life and allow life to thrive. And so that's obviously not allowing life to thrive. Maybe for one person, if it allows one person to be born or if it allows one couple to have a child, then you're allowing that life to thrive. But what about those other eggs that are just sitting there that are fully complete humans just waiting for the time to be grown? But I do think restorative reproductive medicine is a new natural line of medicine that is the alternative to IVF, and they're doing a great job, but there's not a lot of money in it because you can make a lot more money when you do IVF or surrogacy. And so I think when you're looking at medicine, whatever it might be, how can we mend the issues that are already here, and how can we allow life to flourish in the future, and what systems are we setting in place to do that? Because the medicine world is actually getting farther from that in child reproductive systems, because they're figuring out how to create a child just from like a skin sample of a person, because a skin sample has your DNA in it. So if they can figure out how to create an egg from a skin sample, then they don't even need a woman anymore. And so if they can also figure out how to create a womb outside of a woman, the woman's the most expensive part in this whole process. So they're saying if we can do that, then that takes that out of it, and we can just create life whenever and however we want. And so I think that that is definitely against how we should look at medicine. That's what I say.
Yeah, very good. So something else, like kind of along those lines that you brought up in your paper. You at one point say that surrogacy was once a selfless act of carrying a child for a family member or a friend, before you then kind of point out all of these sinful exploitations of surrogacy and kind of like you talked about earlier, the commercialization of life and reproduction and everything. So, do you think there's a way for surrogacy to not be sinful, or do you think that like yeah, just kind of walk me through your thought process.
Yeah, I think before there was a lot of science behind surrogacy, right? Like it was like, oh, hey, I can't have a child. You know, my sister's going to do this for me. We're going to have this child. We're going to raise it as our own. The aunt's still going to be involved in the child's life. You know, it seems less wrong. It's like that aunt may not want that child, or even I think if someone is pregnant and they're like, "Hey, I don't want this baby," and somebody else is like, "Let me raise it as my own," and you're allowing that life to still be brought into this world and flourish, then I think that that is another form of saying, "Hey, we're going to try and mend this situation as best as we can." But I think surrogacy now has become just a way for couples to use to get the outcome that they want, right? They want this child, so how can we do that? We have to go through the process of surrogacy. And to have surrogacy, you actually have to have IVF because especially for same-sex couples, they can't do that. Like that is outside of God's design. And so we have to go through all these medical pathways to even get to where we are today. And so I think surrogacy, I mean, personally, I'm like, I am never going to use surrogacy, right? Like I think that it's morally wrong only because those children that are created through surrogacy, you're inflicting these wounds upon them, right? Like these biological wounds that affect them for the rest of their lives. And they've broken it down into the three kinds of mother a child needs. So they need a biological mother, right? The mother that they get their DNA from, and then they have their birth mother, right? The mother that carries them for 9 months that they have this relationship with, that they know. Like that is all that they know in this world. And then you have this social mother that is the mom that takes care of them every day, that feeds them breakfast, that, does all the things. But if one of those mothers is missing, the child's life is completely like they're already starting at ground one. And so you're destroying that. And I think that when you take a child away from its birth mother, those children, because of the way that their minds are wired, they can only perceive that as a death. And so they don't understand, right? The same sex couples are like, well, we're going to love them just the same. Or even if a heterosexual couple, they're saying, hey, we're going to love this child just the same. But they actually can't because the birth mother and the social mother and the biological mother should all be the same one. And they can only provide what that child needs. And so I think that when you're taking the child away from the person that can give them everything that they need, then we're overstepping boundaries that we do not have the authority to.
Very good. Um, so kind of another theological question for you.
It's
Um,
because we talk about church all the time, Mr. Goddard. It's okay.
you should have seen this coming. I gotta stand by
This is
Pastor
why this
Billy
is why
and
you sat in
all the
front of me
people.
yesterday. You were like, oh, I'm gonna be mean to her tomorrow, so I had to sit in front of her.
For sure. Um, so how should we reconcile the sovereignty of God in bringing about life with our ability to participate in the act of creating life? Like, how do we reconcile those? How do we submit to that?
Yeah, I think that this is a conversation that happens in my household a lot. It's something that I've like grown up talking about. But I think that when you're open, I think a lot of people, especially there's an amazing book called Hannah's Children about this lady that did a study of 50 women across the United States who had 5 or more children, were college educated, came from all walks of life, but their religious backgrounds were completely different. And she asked them like, how did you know, like when you were ready to have another child, or how did you and your husband decide, like what are we doing with this? And I think all of those women came and they were like, like we just had to give it to the Lord. Like it was just something that we had to hand over to him. And so I think there's a lot of peace in knowing that I'm not in control. I think there's a lot of security and confidence that can come in saying the Lord opens the womb and the Lord closes the womb, and we are just going to lay that before him. And I think that's where a lot of women like really struggle is saying, "Oh, I trust the Lord in this area, but maybe not that one. I'm gonna hold this one on to me." Um, But I think a lot of women are actually on the other side of the argument these days because of birth control and just all the contraceptives and their bodies. I mean, if women have been taking birth control since they're 16, I mean, their bodies have been put in timeout and their bodies aren't actually functioning like God designed them to. And so they're actually struggling to have children. And so that's when you come in with IVF and surrogacy and adoption. And those are why those things are such relevant issues, is because we're trying to actually fix the problems that we created a long time ago.
All right, last question, and then I'll pass it to Mr. Miller. Um, so you so you talked about like how you would counsel someone kind of on the before side of all of these issues, someone who's considering an abortion or considering IVF or considering surrogacy or these things. Talk to me about how you would handle someone on the other side of it. The single mom who's just in the thick of it, or the person who did get an abortion, or the people who do have children through IVF, or these different things. Like, how would you love, counsel, help them?
I think the first thing is, I think recognizing what life is, whether that's if they're saying, hey, I had an abortion and now I've come to realize that that was a human that I killed. Like that was my child that I allowed someone to kill. Um, or if it's saying, hey, I realized that all those babies that I froze because I didn't want them at the time are actual humans' lives. Those are people, those are my biological children. Or I even think women who have done egg donations, they're realizing those are my biological children. Like those are my children that the Lord would have allowed me to have, then so I think if those women are coming and they're realizing that, I think first of all, like I think there should definitely be a time of mourning of saying, hey, like this is something that I've done. This is something that I'm very repentative about. This is something that I have a lot of guilt about, and I'm really shameful of what I've done. Then I think that meeting people there and allowing them to say, I really need to take this to the Lord. And I need to say, Lord, I have done this and this is wrong. Lord, can you please forgive me and help me to know which pathway to walk now? Like, is that saying, hey, now I need to go and see how I can cultivate life in other areas? How am I treating people in my life? Like, am I looking at them as made in the image of God? I think allowing there to be like a time of mourning and then of saying, okay, where do I go from here? Like, how do I treat people as made in the image of God? And every life is valuable. And all of those children, wherever they're at in the world, whether they're frozen, whether they're being raised in single parent households, whether they're being raised by single same-sex couples, all those children are children. And so how can I love them well now after what I've already done? And so I think time of mourning and then saying, where do I go from here?
Thank you.
Well,
Your paper wasn't empty. You
I
lied
know.
to me.
Do what?
He showed me this piece of paper in the back and it was completely blank.
I
And he
know.
was like, these are my questions. And I was like, this is going to be really fun because you're really going to have to improv. And y'all, there's a whole paper over here with a whole list of questions.
I know.
Yeah, lies.
So we will. I had another piece of paper underneath it. No, I didn't. I'm teasing.
I knew.
No, it's literally, I can't, I'll sit at my house and I'll go, okay, I'm going to write a question that I'm going to ask tomorrow. Nothing.
Well, you found somewhere. So
I know. It's because
there.
it's because of these great questions. Well, thanks for your topic. And I have a lot to think about now. And you've shared a lot that I didn't know because in some ways, Amy and I have been blessed, and I don't think we sat down and said, okay, Lord, do you want us to have kids? We just start having kids. And what a blessing that is. And then what a opportunity for faith it is when maybe you can't have kids. But all the exploitation of children and to make money is just a travesty, right? And I didn't know, I was going to ask in your research, did you look back at like history of surrogacy as when it kind of became, at what point in our society did it become a money making thing? Is there a year or anything? Did you find any information out like that?
I don't think there's a specific year, but I think when it became like just a way for people to solve the problem, especially for same-sex couples. So I think when obviously I think you've seen a rise in it as same-sex marriage has been legalized. And I think that the more that that has become a thing, right, most of the people that are using surrogacy are same-sex couples. But I also think there's a lot of international commissioning parents using surrogacy in the US because our surrogacy laws are very contract-based. And so their protection and ownership of the child is very secure. And so there's lots of stories of saying, hey, I'm going to use this surrogate, whatever. I need you to carry my child. They pay a certain amount of money, which it's like so very expensive. And so I think that's why it's such a big billion-dollar industry. And it's actually, so it's 14 billion, it's a $14 billion industry now, and it's actually predicted to be a $129 billion industry by 32, which is insane. And I think that's just because they're predicting so many more people to want to use surrogacy because of the way that our culture is trending. But the surrogacy contracts in the US are so secure because they can say at any point that if they've already had, um, like if that child is like in the womb of the surrogate, they can say at any point that they want an abortion. And that surrogate cannot do anything about it. That surrogate has no legal rights to that child, whether or not it's in her body, like it's growing in her. That child is really a lot hers than ever. It's going to be the same sex couples. That woman has no right to say, no, I'm going to raise this child. I want this child as my own because the contracts are so secure. And so I think as obviously as same-sex marriage has become legalized and because of, we're seeing generations of birth control use and abortions. And so all of these women are saying, hey, I can't have children. So what can I do and how can I use that? So I think surrogacy is going to be only become like it's a big deal right now, but I think it's only become a bigger deal in the future as our culture leans more into more that way, I guess.
Mhm. So I think could you maybe describe how culture, as far as comfort and immediacy, microwaves, fast food, plays a part in? I mean, I think it plays a part in surrogacy because I mean, I don't know if you are tracking what I'm asking, but
I think we become a culture of instant gratification. And so I think that that's where this really comes into play. Even if you want to talk about the microwave,
yeah,
personally, I have a microwave at my house. I know a lot of people are like very anti-microwave,
yeah.
but I do have one. But I think like it's like, oh, I can have this now. I can have this right now. This is what I want right now. And so I think surrogacy allows parents to go that way, or even same-sex couples, right? If we didn't have surrogacy and if we didn't have IVF, those same-sex couples would have no way to have those children, which I personally think would be a lot better option. But
Mhm.
because we have those technologies, those couples can still have access to those children.
But I'm talking about like normal population. Like we just want to be comfortable. And I mean, how many women really would rather not have to go through childbirth, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I
And,
think
and we want control. And so, like the ministry that I've chosen to be a part of with my life is MCA. And so I'm not really faced with some of the things that you're saying, but I know there's not a perfect home out there. Even if they're God fearing male and female trying to do it the right way, I see things that happen all the time that are not as extreme as this. And so, can you think of some ways that maybe through, the way you actually played into it a little bit. You called it to have a stability in your family, right? Stability, husband and wife. Do you think all families that have a husband and wife have stable homes?
I don't. And
Yeah.
I think that, like you're saying, like obviously there's God's design, right? So biological man, biological woman, living in marriage, actively living out the gospel on display for their children, bringing children into the world as God designed. But obviously, like you're saying, like no home is perfect. And I think that that's like the saddest part of saying, even so, if we have God's design, right? Like God's given us this ability, if this is the perfect design and you put humans into it and it's really not perfect. And then as humans, we're taking God's design and giving mutations of it. then it's really going to be bad. And I
Yeah.
think those are the statistics that we're seeing, is saying, so this is God's perfect design, and let's tweak this about it, or let's tweak this. And maybe it's okay if there's only one woman in the home, and it's technically a mother, or maybe it's okay if there's two women in the home, or maybe it's okay if there's no man in the home, or maybe it's okay if children are created this way or this way. We are going further and further and further from God's design, and the further you get from God's design, the worse you're going to get. I think that is
Yeah.
that what you wanted?
Well, the crazy thing is there are exceptions, and we put those exceptions, like I think of Moses, you know, he was raised by not his mother. But that's just one person. That doesn't mean that the principle is the principle of a loving family and a husband and wife, and he gets raised by his Jewish parents, you know, how much his life would have been different. But God can take that and make it right. It doesn't justify the evil that's going on. And it seems like that money has something to do with that. The love of money has something into play here as well, because as soon as money was something that you could really make a lot of money on it, then children get exploited even more based on what you're saying. And so let's see.
I'm trying to read your paper, but your handwriting is so bad.
Did-
And it's upside down. I'm really struggling over here.
my handwriting is terrible. Okay, here's something else that just popped in my head. Do you think it's because of the Imago Dei that somehow we can have commercials on TV that you need to save pets, but you don't have really any commercials on TV about saving children? Why is that going on that way?
I love my dog, okay, guys, don't get me wrong. But I do think our culture has, like, obviously, like, gone a very different way of saying, this is my dog, this is my life, you know, my dog has shoes, and my dog, you know, like, the dogs control our lives. And I think it's even funny, 30% of all Americans in the US, y'all, will buy a present for their dog rather than for their neighbor for Christmas. And I'm like, we have lost it. We've lost it. So I think that it's definitely wrong. It just shows, like, the state of people, in that they're willing to love a dog like a human. I think they're transporting human characteristics to these animals. Whether, I mean, you may not have a dog, you may have a lizard, and that's your preference. But you know, like, you're giving these human characteristics to this animal that does not have an eternal soul. But you're saying, oh, you know, it's fine if I have an abortion. And so I think that just demonstrates where our culture's at in viewing life and the image of God in people.
Do you have I think about we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but the principalities of this world. Does that have anything to do with this?
Yeah, I think the devil delights in children being killed. I think the devil delights in children being set aside. And I think he really delights in those children not coming to fruition, and having the ability to know God and know their parents and be in relationship with people. Because I think when you're destroying relationship, because that's ultimately what we're doing, we're taking out the ability for these people to become fully developed humans and to have relationship with other people. And when there's not relationship, there's this big void that we can create. And in the void, the devil can do a lot of things. And when you're normalizing not having people and not creating more life and not generating and developing communities, people are getting further and further and further from the Lord, because there's not as many relationships, and you're destroying the relationships that could be the closest to you, right? Like, developing life through the biological mandate, like, that person is from you, like, that person is the closest person, like, that you're ever going to know. And so when you're destroying that, you're taking out the core relational aspect.
Yeah, and there's an irony, right? That we the most beautiful thing is a child. I mean, it's like, I think everyone would agree that that's what it is. But we also do that with other things that are good. We turn them into bad. We exploit it and turn it into bad. But for a child, that's where I think Satan is focused. It's the greatest joy. And we can, through the principalities that are at work, we get things skewed and messed up. So that's a strategy. All right, I'll pass it back to Kiana.
Great job. You're all done with questions. And now we get to pass the mic over to you to ask us a question.
Okay, guys, we handcrafted these questions on the way to church yesterday. I just want y'all to know we put so much time and effort. Not really. But we decided on a different question for everybody. Mr. Miller, we want your favorite story of your children. Mr. Goodart, the people want to know what your spiritual animal is. Like, if you had a spirit animal, what it would be, and why. And then Miss Gomez, we wanted to know who your favorite female country musician is, and have you seen them in concert?
I can go ahead and answer.
Okay, go. I knew you'd be ready.
I'm sorry, Miss. I love Lainey Wilson. I feel like she just seems like a very like humble person, and I like whenever she does something well and like succeeds, I'm like actually proud of her because she's not one of those people that I feel like thinks she's gonna get something and knows she's gonna do something. Like she actually feels like humility, and she like is like so grateful to like her fans and her like people that like helped push her there. And I actually haven't been to like her concert, like her own concert, but I've seen her a couple of different times, just not like at her own concert. So I have seen her in person, just not a full show. But yeah.
Okay, Mr. Goodart, no pressure. I'm gonna judge you based on this for the rest of my life. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Good. That's what I want. I want this to really cement my
When I
identity.
think of Mr. Goodart 10 years down the road, I'm gonna think of this animal, so this better be really good.
Okay. My first thought is a corgi. So they are
You may need to take a moment. Let's just. Are you sure that's what you want your answer to be?
yes.
Okay.
I
Okay.
walked in.
We're digging a hole here.
Because they are selectively social, which I very much relate to. Like they like interacting with like the people that they know, and they like to interact with people that like, they like know and love, but then they also like want their own space and need to be like antisocial for a bit, and that's very much how I am. They're very intelligent, which I would.
That was a little prideful moment there. It's like FYI, guys, I'm the smartest person in the panel.
Not true, but yeah, and then they are very loyal, which I would hope to be.
That was a little more humble. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna leave it at that.
We probably should. That's good.
Okay, so I got like 3 stories in my brain. Do you want to hear a funny story? Do you want to hear an inspirational story?
Let's go funny.
Funny.
Some comedic relief here.
Okay, so should I tell the Cade story in grammar school? No.
Mr. Prius says yes. I
Okay.
think that's unanimous.
All right. So as I've been here at MCA a lot of years, I've worn a lot of different hats, and at this point in the story, I was Mr. Zinkgraf, his role that he's doing now. But we were a different school then, in the sense that we had the grammar that just started up, and we had this school, and so I kind of worked at both schools, and I would go back and forth and take care of any issues administratively back and forth. And so one day I was late from coming back from lunch because I was helping this guy change his tire over near the mall. And so it ended up taking longer, and it was about 2:30, 2:45 when I got this phone call from Ms. Hunt over at the grammar school. And it went something like this. It was, Ron, you need to, can you come over to the grammar school? There's been a little issue. And I'm like, okay, well, and then before I could even say anything, Jean's like, it's not that bad. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, okay. And then she goes, well, it's about Cade. And I'm like, well, okay. And she kept kind of muddling around, and I'm like, Jean, just what happened, And so she told me that there'd been an incident in the classroom, and I said, okay, I'll be over there as soon as I get back. So I pull in in the parking lot, and Amy's pulling up to go to basketball practice. And we get out of the car about the same time and didn't know the other one was going to be there. And I go, hey, Gene called me from the grammar school, and there's something going on with Cade. We need to go over there and meet with his teacher. And so she's like, okay. So our other kids, Cade's the oldest, our other kids were, the 3 down to however old. And we go take them over there to the playground, and they go start playing in the playground. And Cade's back there playing in the playground when I walk in the office, and I go, well, what's going on? And they go, well, Cade used some colorful language in the classroom. And I'm like, what? And this is 3rd grade, right? 2nd grade, maybe. I don't know. 2nd or 3rd grade. 3rd grade. Amy says 3rd grade. So I had hired his Cade's teacher that year, Mindy, and I forget her name at the time. She's a librarian at the grammar school right now. And so this was her first year teaching, and I walk in and sit down with her, and Amy's with me, and we're like, what happened, And she goes, well, I gave Cade back his paper. And when he got his paper, he looked at me, and excuse me for this, but he goes, what the hell's this? And Mindy goes, excuse me? And she goes, Cade, what did you say? And he goes, what the hell's this? And so Mindy said, I knew he had no idea what he was saying because he repeated it twice right in front of me. And so I go out. I'm like, okay, all right. So I go out to the playground, and Cade's out there playing, and all of our kids are out there playing, And I go over to the picnic table, and I say, Cade, can you come over here and let's talk just a minute? And so I'm like, Cade, did you say something inappropriate to Ms. Wells? And he's like, yes, sir. And I said, well, where did you hear that word, or what word, what's going on? And we'd been going through a sermon at Midland Bible where that hell had come up in the sermon. And I'm like, did you hear that from Mr. Beard, when he was preaching or something? And Kate's like, no. I'm like, okay. And Amy was over with the other kids. And so I'm kind of pressed Kate a little more. And I'm like, Kate, are you sure where did you hear that? And Amy was walking up to the picnic table about that time. And Kate's like squirming a little bit, looking around. And he like looks at Mom as she's walking up, and he goes, well, Mom says it all the time. Amy fires back, I do not. And I'm looking at Amy, and I'm like, Kate, I have never heard your mother say that word. That's not her go-to word, but she doesn't say that word. And so, make a long story short, then that story spread. I don't know how it spread, but it spread, and all our friends heard about it, So that night, that was on a Friday. So that night we played Permian, and it was our first time we were playing Permian, big 5A school, and added on the schedule. And Amy's team that she was coaching at that time beat Permian, and it was awesome. Well, Kevin Doan and some other gentlemen that were my friends came up to Amy after the game, and they're like, heck of a game, coach, heck of a game. But they didn't say heck of a game. And so Amy had to live that down for a number of years. And that was our story. Fast forward about a year later, I found out that a buddy, or one of Kate's buddies in the classroom, had watched Home Alone, and there's a scene in there about pizza, and that's kind of where it came from, and they were saying it in the classroom. So that's just one story. That's my funny story. So
It's a good, funny story.
yeah. You want me to close? And are y'all want to close in prayer? Or you want me to close? Go ahead.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for CoraMay's thesis and just the truth and conviction that she was able to bring. And I pray that this would have an impact on people in the way that they view life and your word. And I pray that you would bless CoraMay as she graduates MCA and goes out into the world. Please help her to just make a positive impact for your kingdom. And we love you and we thank you for your son's death on the cross for our sins. And we pray all this in his most holy name. Amen.